How did Cecilia start stealing my identity? Well, in the beginning stages, I didn't really uh, realize what she was doing, nor did I even realize it until leaving her. But early in our friendship, Cecilia decided that we needed to have nicknames for each other because best friends generally have nicknames for each other. Uh, yeah, so she came up with the nicknames Snooky and Pookie. In that moment of coming up with the nicknames, we were in a funny, ridiculous type mindset, throwing out the weirdest and funniest of nicknames. Ria was actually present during that time. and I were actually lying on her bed, and Ria was sitting on the bed. Ria was busy going through her things for work, and Cecilia and I were busy talking about a lot of nonsense. Cecilia was always full of funny type talk nonsense when she was with me, so it wasn't something that was unusual. So when we were even coming up with nicknames, Cecilia even started throwing out nicknames for Ria as well, to include her, and Ria would always give very weird stares and looks, and then eventually make comments like, "Stop being ridiculous," or "Really, is that, what you want to call me?" Ria was definitely a far more serious person than me. Well, she still is. But, none of the nicknames for Ria ever stuck. I mean, at that point, Cecilia and all her supposed DID parts called Ria mommy or mom at that point, if not just Ria, But for me, Cecilia wanted to give me a nickname, and then I also had to call Cecilia by a nickname. So I don't remember all the nicknames that she came up with, but eventually it came down to Snooky and Pookie because they were the most ridiculous and the funniest of a lot of the nicknames. And I think Cecilia was supposed to be called Snooky, and I was supposed to be called Pookie. I can't actually remember who was who right now. But very, very soon, I think it was even just an hour or two into it, once the nicknames had kind of sort of solidified, Cecilia decided that no, we are both going to have exactly the same nickname. We were both going to be called Pookie. So that honestly for me was quite confusing, because technically you're supposed to have different nicknames, but Cecilia was very adamant that it had to be the exact same nickname. It wasn't a big deal. It's not like a life and death sort of scenario, so I just shrugged it off and thought, okay, fine. I'll have to sit and think and try to remember who actually was supposed to be called Pookie. But anyway, so that was actually, looking back now, that was actually the beginning stages of Cecilia trying to steal my identity and trying to merge me or warp me, or however you want to put it, into being exactly like her. As the days and weeks and months went by, Cecilia and I would go clothes shopping and usually end up at Mr. Price. And whatever clothing would be bought, of course, I would be the one to buy it, because Cecilia deemed me as the financial one to pay for everything. And Mr. Price was cheap at that stage, so it wasn't a big deal. But whatever I wanted to buy for myself, Cecilia wanted exactly the same item of clothing, and whatever Cecilia wanted to buy for herself, she insisted on getting two of the same because she wanted me to wear the same. So we ultimately had to dress alike, which was kind of strange because her style in clothing was not exactly my style in clothing. Not that I didn't like her style, but her style was exceptionally baggy, and mine wasn't. When I met Cecilia, I was definitely far more dressed up. than she ever was. Not that I was formal or went completely out there with the way I dressed. I mean, I would wear makeup, my hair would be down, uh, wear jeans or a skirt and a sort of tight-fitting top, and that would typically be me. But Cecilia definitely didn't like that, obviously. And as the whole clothing scenario started, it very quickly merged into both of us wearing baggy jeans, baggy t-shirt. I always had to have my hair tied up. I was not allowed to wear makeup. We had to look identical. This was actually, it was strange, but I didn't honestly mind because she was my best friend after all. Um, and I'll explain in another point of how she stressed how important I was to her as a best friend. But underlying the reason for dressing like her, there was so much value put into me by her, for me being her best friend, that I suppose subconsciously I felt obliged to dress like her because, I was just that special that it made her feel closer to me. I'm not sure if that makes sense. So, yeah, that's how I started dressing. Of course, we also ended up wearing exactly the same tackies because we had to buy the exact same shoes as well. But yeah, I mean, when I would go home or when I would leave Cecilia, I would change into any other clothing that was actually my normal type clothing. But every time I went to see Cecilia, I had to dress exactly like her. And by the time this whole clothing thing had been established, every time I would go see Cecilia, I would have to check with her either the day before or that morning before I went to her, what she was wearing. If she hadn't already told me by that point, what she was wearing or what she was going to wear. Because I had to pitch up by her place, or when I pitched up by her place, I had to be wearing exactly the same things and dressed identically. If any of the things that she was wearing was actually, if mine was in the wash, then she would ask me, well, what clothes aren't in the wash, and then she would decide which t-shirt we would then both wear. By that point, I mean, I very quickly didn't mind, not much phases me, so it was honestly a pain, having to dress identical to someone else, having your outfit constantly coordinated for you. Look, I suppose pros and cons, I didn't have to think much about it, because I hate deciding what to wear every day. So in one way, it took that sort of fuss away, but it also was a pain, to feel obliged to dress like someone else. But yeah, I didn't honestly mind. And there was this one day where Doug had come from America to meet Cecilia. His first time in South Africa, he was a pastor. Ria had told him all about Cecilia, and he was so excited to meet her. And by that point, I had also spoken to him quite a bit, just through text messages and emails. But on the day that he arrived, Cecilia, as always, had told me what to wear. But now, because predominantly most of the clothing that we wore was, dark clothing, be black t-shirts or grey t-shirts, very rarely a white one. That was pretty much the color coordination in general. But Cecilia told me, which black t-shirt to wear. And so I got dressed and went to her house. As soon as I parked my car, Cecilia came outside to greet me, and she gave me this very not unimpressed look. She gave me this very unimpressed look, and I didn't understand why. But I didn't really stop to ask because Ria then quickly introduced me to Doug, and the conversations began. And the whole time, Cecilia still had this disgusted look on her face. So eventually, I asked her, it was probably like 5-10 minutes into arriving at her house. I asked Cecilia, what, why does she look upset? Why does she look disgusted? Why is she looking at me like that? And she said to me, "You're wearing the wrong t-shirt." And I just shrugged it off and I said, "Oh, okay," because she told me which t-shirt it should have been, and there were two that were very similar. So obviously, I misunderstood. And I just shrugged it off and said to her, "Oh, well, okay, I misunderstood. I didn't see, what the big deal was. I mean, she was wearing a black t-shirt. I was wearing a black t-shirt. It had the wrong, we didn't exactly have the right wording or images on the t-shirts, so we weren't identical." I was honestly not fazed. I didn't see the big deal, but Cecilia was very highly unimpressed. So much so that she actually dragged me to the bathroom and forced me to change my clothing. As far as I remember, she gave me one of her t-shirts, and it actually, as far as memory serves, we still didn't end up wearing the same clothing because she didn't have two identical t-shirts of anything at her home, so she couldn't exactly give me another identical t-shirt to what she was wearing, even if she changed her t-shirt. But she dragged me to the bathroom, gave me another one of her t-shirts, which was different to what she was wearing, but I had to now wear this new t-shirt, and then she was happy. I did not understand this whole scenario, but I changed my top. I was confused. It was very strange, but okay, fine. Don't see what the big fuss is. And when I came out of the bathroom and we went back to where Doug and Ria were, they were both confused. Doug more so than Ria, because at this point Ria was basically used to it. And Doug was very confused, like why suddenly abruptly leave the room, why suddenly change clothing, what's this huge fuss about? And I just looked at him, shrugged my shoulders, and I think I said to him, we usually wear the same clothing. Cecilia wasn't happy. It was something along those lines. And he just returned this very confused look. I don't know what ran through his mind. He was very confused. You could clearly see it. I suppose at that point, a little bit frustrated because of the whole scenario. I don't know why the huge upset over a different t-shirt, and still ultimately ending up with a different t-shirt anyway to what Cecilia was wearing, but except at this point, after having changed the t-shirt, Cecilia was the one that actually decided what I wore. So even though we weren't dressed alike, Cecilia still dictated what I wore. It was it was probably the strangest and the biggest, I'm not sure what word to use here, the biggest example, the strangest scenario of how Cecilia wanted to control my very identity. It was confusing, and I definitely didn't realize it at that point, and it took me many years afterwards, after leaving her, to actually realize it. Everything we did, it had to be the same. Everything we even ate had to be identical. If we went to Wimpy or McDonald's or any other place for that matter and got fast food, whatever I wanted to eat, Cecilia would make sure she ate the same thing. Or if I wasn't sure what I wanted to eat, Cecilia would tell me what to eat. It was very, very strange. But yeah, I mean, I'm the type of person that things like that don't faze me. But at that point, it should have been warning bells, alarm bells, freaking sirens, actually. But yeah, she was trying to mold me into being like her. And if I couldn't be identical to her, she at the very least just wanted to control every aspect of who I was as a person. So much about me actually changed. I'm just trying to think if, I mean, she would even replicate the way I'd say things, the words I'd use. I mean, I know when two people spend a lot of time together, they do start replicating each other's mannerisms. So that for me, I definitely didn't think much about. I just thought, well, we spent a lot of time together, so we're obviously rubbing off on each other. But underlying it, she probably was doing it on purpose. Uh, yeah. So it's quite strange to have someone trying to forcefully mold you into something.